Beth and Rip spinoff needs to avoid being Yellowstone Season 6. And just not because of potential legal problems. Taylor Sheridan must avoid making Beth and Rip's spin-off show into Yellowstone Season 6, not just because of the potential legal battle over the rights to stream the series. Mere days before the Yellowstone Season 5 finale, a report confirmed Beth and Rip's Yellowstone spin-off would continue the Lovebird stories after Yellowstone's ending. While Kelly Riley and Cole Hauser keeping their Yellowstone characters alive was an exciting prospect, the announcement triggered the potential for legal battles between the companies that stream Yellowstone and its spin-off shows, since Beth and Rip's show could look a lot like Yellowstone Season 6. The legal battles will insist that Beth and Rip's Yellowstone spin-off distinguish itself from the flagship series, and we'll get into that next. Still, legal battles aside, Rayleigh and Hauser's characters deserve a show that distinguishes itself from the Kevin Costner-led series. While Beth's story indelibly connects to John Dutton II, Case, and all the other Yellowstone Season 5 characters, Beth and Rip's substantial Yellowstone backstories and enigmatic personalities have the chops to stand on their own. So Sheridan ought to give the characters a story that's independent of the Dutton family's struggles. The Deadline report that confirmed Beth and Rip's Yellowstone spinoff insinuated that it was favorable for Paramount Network's parent, Paramount Global, to produce a new series instead of Yellowstone Season 6, because an offshoot would bring the continuation of Yellowstone into the company's ecosystem. Paramount has a deal with Peacock's parent company, NBCUniversal, giving Peacock exclusive streaming rights to the franchise's flagship. In other words, Peacock can stream Kevin Costner's series, but Paramount Plus can't. Therefore, continuing Beth and Rip's story outside the flagship allows Paramount Network and Paramount Plus to air and stream the show exclusively. A report from Puck claimed the choice to produce Rip and Beth's spinoff versus Yellowstone could trigger a legal battle with Peacock. As the Beth and Rip Yellowstone spinoff takes shape, it must distinguish itself from a potential Yellowstone Season 6 to avoid legal battles, proving that the spinoff was more than just a way to skirt the network's existing deal. The deal predates Paramount Plus, which has the rights to stream Sheridan's other series, such as prequels 1883 and 1923, and everything the screenwriter produces thereafter. Sheridan has a deal with Paramount Plus to create content for the platform until 2028. While the legal battle marks Yellowstone's Beth and Rip spinoff encountering its first big problem, it isn't bad news for the series. Other reasons exist that Hauser and Riley's series should distinguish itself from the flagship, rather than just becoming a continuation of Yellowstone, with them at the center instead of Costner. Beth and Rip have rich backstories in Yellowstone, potentially more than any other characters, including John Dutton. Flashbacks in the original series extensively paint Beth and Rip's adolescence, emboldening the characters' strong personalities in the present. The continuation of Beth and Rip's story deserves the same distinguished treatment. Furthermore, Beth and Rip's story must prove it warrants a continuation. While Beth and Rip's spin-off announcement cheapened the Yellowstone season finale, the couple had a sweet ending that neatly wrapped up their story. Sheridan could have just left Beth and Rip's story where it was, allowing fans to spin their own conclusions about how the couple would navigate the brutal winters in Dillon, Montana, with their adopted son, Carter. In other words, Beth, Carter, and Rip's story didn't need to continue. But now that it will, the Dutton Wheelers need a fresh narrative that honors the family's independent journey. There are significant ties between Beth and Rip's story and a potential Yellowstone Season 6. The Deadline report suggested that Beth and Rip's spinoff will include the Yellowstone moniker in the title and some of the flagship's main characters in the cast. With such blatant connections to the main show, the series must make decisive creative choices that distinguish Beth and Rip's story from the Montana Dynasty saga thus far. The flagship's ultimate episode set up Beth and Rip to differentiate themselves successfully, despite the Yellowstone finale ruling out an interesting Beth and Rip story in Texas. Despite staying in Montana, Beth and Rip's distance from the heirloom Yellowstone Dutton Ranch will give their story an entirely new backdrop. As Beth and Rip relinquish stewardship of the ranch, they will face altogether different hurdles. The spinoff should focus more on Beth and Rip's past and future, rather than continuing to hash the Dutton family's issues with their land legacy, which Yellowstone fleshed out as Beth and Rip are concerned. If the flagship continues with Yellowstone Season 6, Beth and Rip's story might be free of legal hurdles, but it should distinguish itself from Yellowstone regardless. The Yellowstone universe has captivated audiences with its blend of rugged Western charm, cutthroat family dynamics, and high-stakes drama. Beth Dutton and Rip Wheeler, two of its most compelling characters, have a chemistry so magnetic that the idea of a spin-off centered on them feels like a natural next step. But as exciting as this prospect is, there's a risk. If the spin-off isn't handled carefully, it could end up feeling like a watered-down extension of Yellowstone Season 6. To stand on its own, Beth and Rip's story must carve a new path, one that honors the essence of these beloved characters while exploring fresh narratives and themes. Breaking free from the Yellowstone mold. At its core, Yellowstone thrives on the sprawling Dutton family saga, land disputes, and a fierce battle for power. A Beth and Rip spinoff, however, has an opportunity to shed some of these overarching themes and focus on something more intimate. Rather than being tied to the sprawling Yellowstone ranch and its conflicts, the show could explore what happens when two fiercely independent people try to build a life together, away from the chaos that has defined their lives for so long. The spinoff's tone could shift to a more character-driven, introspective narrative, trading the sprawling grandeur of Montana for a smaller, more contained setting. Perhaps Beth and Rip move to a remote part of Wyoming, or even leave the West altogether to pursue a dream of quiet solitude. The drama could center around their attempts to adapt to this new life, exploring whether two people who've only known chaos can truly find peace. New challenges beyond the ranch. While Yellowstone often revolves around external threats, Beth and Rip's spinoff could focus on internal struggles. Rip's haunted past and Beth's unresolved trauma are rich veins to mine for storytelling. What does a marriage between two such volatile souls look like when they're not constantly fighting external enemies? What happens when the adrenaline fades and the everyday realities of life come into focus? Perhaps they're faced with building their own ranch from scratch, or maybe they take in a troubled teenager, forcing them to confront their own wounds in new ways. Introducing fresh characters, neighbors, employees, or even distant relatives can help populate their world without leaning on familiar Yellowstone faces. These characters could serve as mirrors, challenging Beth and Rip's perspectives and forcing them to grow in unexpected ways, avoiding over-the-top drama. One of the criticisms Yellowstone has faced in later seasons is its tendency to lean into increasingly outlandish plots. For the spin-off to succeed, it needs to resist the temptation to go bigger for the sake of spectacle. Beth and Rip's story thrives in its raw emotional depth, not in helicopter chases or cartel shootouts. By grounding the narrative in smaller, more relatable stakes, the show can create a sense of authenticity that sets it apart. For instance, a season-long arc could revolve around something as simple, yet profound, as repairing a broken piece of land or rebuilding trust with a fractured community. These quieter, more personal stories can still be deeply engaging without veering into melodrama. Leaning into their love story. At the heart of any Beth and Rip spinoff is their relationship, which has always been the emotional anchor of Yellowstone. The spinoff has an opportunity to explore their dynamic in greater depth, showing audiences what happens after the happily ever after. Marriage doesn't magically solve everything, and their journey could explore themes of trust, compromise, and vulnerability in a way that feels both raw and hopeful. A fascinating angle could be how their differing worldviews create tension. Beth's fiery ambition and relentless drive might clash with Rip's desire for a quieter, simpler life. How do they reconcile these differences while staying true to themselves and each other? This tension could provide the backbone for the show, offering plenty of room for character growth and heartfelt moments.